number 5 is the Coastal Resilience Master Plan and Program Environmental Impact Report. If you're watching on City TV or the live stream online, you'd like to dial in the meeting to speak, please call 1-669-254-5252, inputting webinar ID 161-907-2156 #. Chair.
All right, thank you, Sarah. If our presenters would like to please introduce yourselves for the record and let us know how much time you'd like for the presentation.
Good morning, council members. My name is Julia Chase, and we need about 15 minutes for the presentation.
Please proceed.
So today, hi everyone. I'm Julia Chase. I'm the Chief Resilience Officer and Program Manager with City Planning Department, joined here today by Heidi Von Bloom, Planning Director, and I'll be presenting on the Coastal Resilience Master Plan. The Coastal Resilience Master Plan identifies potential nature-based solutions for locations along San Diego's coast to improve the resilience of our communities to sea level rise, while also protecting habitat, supporting recreation opportunities, and improving coastal access. The plan includes concept-level designs for 6 locations, as well as completion of our CEQA environmental analysis. The city has undertaken efforts as sea level rise, particularly when combined with extreme storms and higher tides, will result in accelerated cliff and bluff erosion, increased coastal flooding, and flooding from groundwater intrusion. This means more damage and increased access of our coastal communities, assets, infrastructure, culturally significant areas, as well as impacts to our local economy. We are already seeing these impacts along San Diego's coastline. Based on the best available science, there is greater certainty on the amount of sea level rise anticipated for 2050, with a wider range of projections for the end of century and beyond. Sea level rise means more frequent flooding along our coast, where we typically might see 1 to 2 days of high tide flooding. By the end of the century, that flooding may become a regular occurrence without adaptation strategy implementation. The city has taken action to protect our coast from the risks of coastal flooding and erosion. The first step was to complete a vulnerability assessment to understand where along the coast was most exposed to sea level rise, and of those areas, what assets and resources would be most vulnerable. The vulnerability assessment found significant exposure of both city and non-city assets and estimated replacement costs of these assets. These findings are reinforced by regional studies that found $8 billion in sales and $6 billion in GDP contributions are vulnerable to sea level rise-driven flooding. While it is important to note that these estimates are conservative and assume no adaptation measures are implemented, they do represent the significant risk that sea level rise poses to the city assets and the local economy. To address this, the city developed Climate Resilient SD, the city's first climate adaptation and resilience plan. The plan includes a suite of strategies aimed at mitigating risk from climate hazards, including sea level rise, and building community capacity to respond to and recover from these hazards. The Coastal Resilience Master Plan was an identified strategy within Climate Resilient SD to develop a suite of nature-based solution pilot projects to support coastal resilience. Nature-based solutions are sustainable planning, design, and engineering practices that incorporate or mimic natural features or processes into the built environment to promote climate resilience. The Coastal Resilience Master Plan looks to achieve the following objectives: to address the effects of sea level rise while leveraging additional co-benefits of nature-based solutions, to protect and enhance critical coastal habitat and associated wildlife from the impacts of climate change, to protect and enhance recreation opportunities, to protect our historical, archaeological, and tribal cultural resources and incorporate Indigenous knowledge into resilience efforts and adaptation strategies, and to increase coastal access for all community members with a prioritization for communities of concern. The work of the Coastal Resilience Master Plan is fully grant funded through 2 grants. Phase 1 of the project is funded through a National Fish and Wildlife Grant and includes site selection, prioritization, site feasibility analysis, development of nature-based solution concept designs for 6 sites, 1 pilot project design, community engagement, convening of a stakeholder advisory committee, an internal city working group, and completion of the program environmental impact report. Phase 1 of the project is now complete. Phase 2 of the project is funded through a State Coastal Conservancy grant. Work is underway with the scope supporting updates and completion of the draft Coastal Resilience Master Plan and supporting enhanced coordination and outreach to tribal nations and organizations. Future work under Phase 2 will include continued community and stakeholder engagement, tribal coordination, completion of initial engineering for 3 more sites, technical studies to inform project design, and additional environmental analysis as needed. The planning effort included initial evaluation of 11 sites for site suitability and narrowed the scope down to 6 locations most appropriate and feasible for nature-based solutions. Sites shown in orange were considered but not prioritized at this time. Sites in yellow were included within the plan. Prioritization factors included city ownership, our multi-habitat planning area, disadvantaged communities, sea level rise vulnerability, and overall site feasibility. Stakeholder and community engagement has been continuous throughout plan development, providing opportunity to iteratively update the project concepts to designs to reflect feedback. City planning engaged with the community through workshops, webinars, pop-ups, online surveys, and stakeholder committee meetings. Throughout engagement, there are over 1,300 community touchpoints. The following are key themes of community feedback received throughout plan development. Community members desired greater safety, particularly for pedestrians and beach users. Parking was a top priority for all community members for sites as a means to access the coast, as was enhanced access through multimodal means, as well as ADA and emergency access. Community members value a range of recreation uses along the coast and express strong interest in these opportunities being maintained. We also received interest in incorporation of art, cultural, and educational features into the project designs, as well as strong support for the use of native plants in project design. Community members identified the need for stormwater drainage improvements at many of the project sites and were interested in continued engagement opportunities as the projects move forward. Concept designs considered historic conditions, development and management constraints, historic impacts, hazard overlay, current uses, and visions for the future of the coast. Concepts aim to provide resilience, create new habitat space, enhance mobility opportunities, and provide a balanced and integrated approach to managing coastal resources that considers infrastructure, habitat, access, and recreation. We'll now walk through each of the project concepts from north to south. Our first site is La Jolla Shores that has 2 proposed project designs. Neither are recommended to move forward at this time. The amphitheater design to the left maintains the existing alignment for La Jolla Shores and includes 2 different flood protection strategies across the site. Along the seaward borders of La Jolla Shores Park and Kellogg Park, an elevated linear earthen dike would be constructed. Along the seaward border of the parking lot, a terraced seat wall would be constructed to provide viewing and seating while also providing flood protection benefits. The reconfigured park to the right would realign the parking lot and grassy recreational areas, essentially swapping the seaward edge of the parking lot for a more inland alignment. This would create a large linear continuous park along the seaward side. While parking would be configured, the total amount of parking was proposed to remain the same. The project at Tourmaline Surf Park is not recommended to move forward as a CIP at this time, but is recommended once funding becomes available. The proposed design converts the existing shoreline protection feature into a hybrid nature-based solution. The existing riprap would be buried and topped with a mix of cobble and sand that would be vegetated with native plantings. Additional seating and enhanced viewing areas would be integrated into the top of the dune. One additional project features includes covering or undergrounding the existing drainage culvert along the north end of the project site to create additional green space and a pedestrian pathway down to the shores. An additional component integrates further stormwater improvements to include an underground vault beneath the parking lot to capture runoff and provide water quality treatment. As these optional components are considered, project design will be further refined to maximize the benefit to city and community. There are 2 proposed project concepts for Mission Beach. This project site is recommended to move forward as a CIP with plan adoption. The sand dune concept for Mission Beach would construct an elevated sand dune seaward of the seawall. The sand dunes would be vegetated with native plantings to provide ecological benefits. The proposed sand dune would be a permanent fixture at the project site and would be designed to provide protection from existing and projected flooding impacts. The perch beach concept for the Mission Beach at the right considers swapping out a portion of the grass recreational space at Mission Beach Park for a perch sand beach. A perched beach is an elevated beach area that would provide increased usable beach space during higher water levels and also offer a reservoir of sand for the adjacent beach area. Both project concepts are intended to replace the existing winter burn program. The Ocean Beach Dog Beach Dunes project proposes dune habitat restoration at the eastern edge of the project site near Smiley Lagoon, as well as a new multi-use path for cyclists and pedestrians fronted by elevated sand dunes that run along the beach. The proposed sand dunes will be vegetated with native plantings to provide ecological benefits. The Ocean Beach Resilient Relocation Project concept on the right maintains the same dune habitat restoration, multi-use path, and elevated sand dune, but relocates the existing restroom further inland. Optional features for this design are to add an express shuttle or other form of connection to a nearby transit station to improve beach access. Similar to Ocean Beach Dog Beach, the concept for Ocean Beach Beachfront would construct the multi-use path for cyclists and pedestrians fronted by a sand dune. This project would connect the existing western terminus of the San Diego River Trail down to the Ocean Beach Pier through the multi-use path. Similar to the Mission Beach site, the Ocean Beach project sites are intended to replace the winter burn program. The 2 Ocean Beach project sites are recommended to move forward as a CIP with plan adoption. This is a visual representation of what the OB project concept could look like. For our last site, Sunset Cliffs, given the narrow cliff edges and limited amount of recreation space, the major focus for the Sunset Cliffs project is to protect public safety and enhance the existing resources without compromising structural integrity of the cliff or current infrastructure. For the northern portion of the project site, the proposed concept looks to realign the parking lots away from the cliff edge to pull in parking spaces along the roadway, with the opportunity to explore paid parking for the on-street realignment. This section of the project also includes a separated pedestrian and bike path, trail enhancements, revegetation of the linear park with native vegetation, and drainage improvements as necessary. The southern section of the project site considers a road reconfiguration on Sunset Cliffs Boulevard, which would maintain the new separated path for pedestrians and convert the roadway into a one-lane, one-way southbound vehicle lane. The Sunset Cliffs site is recommended to move forward to a CIP at this time. This is a key overview of the changes made following public review, largely clarifications of project intent and next steps. For the plan, this includes adding more detailed explanation on the design options and trade-offs and clarification around work completed under this phase versus future phases of project development. For the program, EIR includes clarification around habitat protection, as well as clarified intent of some of the mitigation measures. This spring and early summer, the plan will continue to move forward through public hearings. This will conclude work under Phase 1 and conclude the work of the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant. Phase 2 of the project continues the work of the State Coastal Conservancy grant. A key step is to initiate the CIP for the pilot projects. The pilot project recommendations have been made with a focus on the sites with the greatest vulnerability to sea level rise, opportunities to improve public safety, the ability to offset current operation costs, and an overall goal to bolster local economy and tourism. This work will position the city to take advantage of the significant funding available through the $10 billion climate bond, which includes $1.2 billion for coastal resilience. Staff recommendation includes adoption of the Coastal Resilience Master Plan, creation of a capital improvement project for Mission Beach, Ocean Beach Dog Beach, Ocean Beach Pier, and Sunset Cliff sites, and certification of the program environmental impact report. The Coastal Resilience Master Plan was brought forward to the Resiliency Advisory Board in April 2025. The Advisory Board voted in support of staff's recommendation with a preference for the resilient relocation and perch beach designs. That concludes staff presentation. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you for the presentation. Sarah, let's hear public comment, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've received 2 speaker slips here in the committee room, so we'll begin with in-person testimony. Mitch Silverstein, you will be followed by Nat Gerard, and you will have 2 minutes.
All right, just hang on. Honorable committee members, Mitch Silverstein, Senior San Diego Policy Coordinator for Surfrider Foundation. The preservation of our beaches and public access is core to our mission, a core concern of our 4,000 local members, and also core to the lifestyle, environment, and economy of San Diego. We aim to represent all beach goers, not just those who live in the beach communities. Surfrider applauds this effort to maintain city beaches in the face of rising seas, and especially appreciates giving nature-based solutions priority over the traditional approach of armoring our coast with seawalls. Every decision to build a seawall may protect property or infrastructure from flooding temporarily, but it is also a decision to not protect the beach. Every foot of sea level rise corresponds to 50 or more feet of beach loss. If a beach is drowned or is flooded during annual king tides today, then it'll flood regularly at high tide within 50 to 60 years, according to current science. We support staff's recommended sites to be added to the capital improvement program. And for sites with multiple concepts, we recommend that you support the concepts that offer the most sea level rise resilience. At Mission Beach, we recommend concept D2, Perched Beach, because it transforms existing grass to sandy beach, a coastal dependent resource which we know is eroding and getting squeezed by rising seas. And at OB, we recommend concept A2, Resilient Relocation, because it moves a bathroom whose siting will become a pinch point as the ocean encroaches. We are not forgetting about Tourmaline and La Jolla Shores, but we, quite frankly, feel those plans need to be made a little better. At La Jolla Shores, we do prefer reconfiguring the park, but recommend additional scoping to pull back the boardwalk. The beach is drowned and the boardwalk floods during annual king tides today, and if we hold that line, we'll lose access at a regular high tide in 50 to 60 years. A plan like this ought to have at least a 75-year project life. At Tourmaline, we got to look at pulling that parking lot landward to increase resilience at this narrow, eroding beach. Covering the existing riprap with a sand dune is an improvement, but it's more aesthetic than truly resilient. I put a lot more details into an email I sent. I hope you have time to look over those. Please support staff recommendations today, and thank you so much for your service and service to our beaches.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker is Nat.
Hi, thank you. So my name is Nat Giroux. I live in District 2 in San Diego on Ocean Beach, more specifically. So this is an area that's really important to me. I grew up in San Diego. In Claremont, I've lived in City Heights, I've lived in College area, I've lived in North Park, I've lived in Point Loma. Everywhere I go, I end up back on the beach. And I think that's true for a lot of people here in San Diego. Wherever people are, they might be living inland, but they spend time on the beach because that's one of the things that makes our city great, right? And that's the thing that keeps bringing people back. So I've lived in other places, and I always come back because I like to spend my time on the beach. I appreciate the weather. I appreciate the life here in San Diego. And when I think about the prospect of losing that, it's disappointing. It would be unsettling. And I think that's a real situation. It's a real possibility because I spent a lot of time on Sunset Cliffs. I spent a lot of time walking up and down Ocean Beach, and I've seen that sea level rise, literally. The high tides are insane. The beach by the pier is disappearing, and I can't let that happen, right? But I don't have that power to prevent that. You guys do. So the staff here put together a plan that's really a great start, a definite step in the right direction. I'd suggest it doesn't go far enough. I agree with everything that the last speaker just said. He put it great. I'm not going to repeat it. But in every situation, anytime you can bring things back off of the coast so that we can free up that space for the people of San Diego, I would say that you're making a good decision. I would say that this is a step in the right direction. And I would say that if you had the option to take it a little bit further, you should definitely move forward with that. I would support it, and I know that a lot of other people would too. Thinking about the prospect of home loss and infrastructure loss, I know that there's a lot of talk about seawalls up and down San Diego. This is a better option. You have nature-based solutions with natural vegetation that'll make a good experience for everyone involved. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll begin the 5-minute timer for all those in the virtual queue to indicate if they wish to provide comment for item number 5. Beginning testimony with the original, please unmute and provide your comment.
You guys love using fear, very reminiscent of the Nephilim. Pretty sure that's who you guys are. It's interesting because you talk about safety, habitat, and wildlife, and putting a sidewalk along the beach. But then you sit here and say that, in 50 to 60 years, we're not going to have access to that. And, it's like for decades that's been said that California is going to be underwater. I mean, I remember being a teenager and that happening. And so it's interesting that because all you have to do is put fear in the people, then they'll come begging to you for you to come and mitigate it. But you guys aren't God, and you're never going to be able to, mitigate the reality of what happens in the nature. You think you can. And the way you talk about habitat and wildlife, you don't care about them. People come into you guys and will talk about the birds, they'll talk about horses, they'll talk about different things, and you don't give two shits. You don't even care about people dying in Tent City or anywhere for that matter. You actually actively engage in their deaths. So, all of the propaganda that you guys love to spew and like having paid parking, if you really cared about, the fact that this could potentially be happening, that, the water's going to rise so badly that we're going to have to get away from the coast, why would you build right by the coast? Why would you put a sidewalk right there? Why would you waste $1.2 billion to just pretend to like move things back a little bit? If you really were frightened, just like if you were frightened about water and don't waste it, you wouldn't let it out to move from one reservoir to another, losing half of it. You wouldn't continue to build things. You would work imperatively and very fast to make sure that nobody was by the coast, to move all of the buildings from downtown, to move all of the things from the coastline, not build right there. So if you want people to believe what you're doing, then your actions should reflect that.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker is Blair Beekman.
Hi, thank you, Blair Beekman. In either Singapore or Indonesia, they're moving their whole capital because of sea level rise. And to comment on the words of DRA. So, where sea level rise is really here, and I feel it's here, and it's got me worried. And I thought there were good explanations from people previous, and thank you. Good luck with what we can do to work on these issues. There wasn't any mention of pollution reports made. How are we dealing with, the pollution issues coming from the Tijuana River Valley. I lived in San Diego in the late 80s. I mean, it was still the same issues back then. And, I lived in Ocean Beach, and it was always a slight worry, of how in swimming in that water, where the water was coming from. And has that exponentially grown since the 1980s? Is the problem worse? Is it the same? I think it's something that should be addressed. And I know Mexico is working on it in terms of desalinization. They don't want to go the pure water route. They want to use desalinization as, to address the Tijuana River Valley. I learned that from city government staff, so I just thought I'd pass that along at this time. Otherwise, good luck with this item. And good luck with good legal choices that we make in San Diego. I'm really hopeful in our good legal choices with immigrant issues and immigrant rights issues. And good luck that we can have the same good legal principles with upcoming environmental concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Zachary. Please unmute and provide your comment.
Hi, thank you. My name is Zach Zielman. I'm a resident of Ocean Beach, San Diego, and I'd like to thank the city for preparing the Coastal Resilience Master Plan to begin with, and please continue to prioritize using nature-based solutions over the transitional shoreline armoring to start preparing for sea level rise right now, and using techniques such as sand dune enhancements and even relocation and retreat away from the eroding bluffs at Sunset Cliffs rather than coastal armoring. It is really an urgent issue and will become more urgent. Please push forward the most resilient designs for each of these beaches to center the preservation of the beach and public access to them. And I'd like to ask the committee to please support bringing the plans for Ocean Beach, Sunset Cliffs, and Mission Beach to 15% design. And I also urge you to direct city staff to devote more attention to improving the proposals for Tourmaline and La Jolla Shores. Like the other speakers mentioned, when funding does come available to pursue the reconfigured park at La Jolla Shores and other nature-based solutions for Tourmaline. Please don't allow short-sighted private and development interests to impede the preservation of these cherished city assets for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And Chair, this concludes testimony for item number 5.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Let's begin our discussion with Councilmember Campbell, and then we'll go to Council President LaCava.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you for the presentation and all the hard work the City Planning Department has put into this Coastal Resilience Master Plan. As a council representative of a coastal district, I want to express my support for this item and the steps that we are taking as a city to address sea level rise and its impact on our coastal communities. Residents and visitors alike enjoy our beaches, and unfortunately with sea level rise, coastal erosion, and extreme weather, our beaches are being negatively impacted. The work we are doing with this master plan is essential to ensure that our coastlines remain safe, accessible, and sustainable for future generations. I'm especially glad to see that the priority projects advancing are all located in District 2 at Ocean Beach, Dog Beach, Ocean Beach Beachfront, Sunset Cliffs, and Mission Beach. And I want to express my strong support for this item. And with that, I will make the motion to accept staff's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Campbell. We've got a motion, and we'll now turn to Council President LaCava.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm very unhappy that none of the projects in District 1 are going forward. We've had that conversation, so I won't repeat it. So one thing I wanted to start out, when this comes to council, please add the resiliency plan to the backup material. I think people may want to dive in beyond just the PowerPoint, which is pretty helpful. I think I kind of feel compelled to give a little bit of context, so bear with me. And those with gray hair probably remember back in the 1990s as we started doing more and more development, pushing into the north and to the east into more natural territory. We decided that habitat preservation and environmental impacts were something we should be thinking about. And we came up with this grand idea of what became known as the string of pearls. This development would do a little pocket of natural habitat, and this project over here would be a natural habitat. And on paper, it looked pretty good. And then you realize that, you know, wildlife doesn't actually care, doesn't follow a map. The importance to the flora and the fauna to have broad areas to propagate and to create that diversity that is so important. And we finally got our act together, and we really looked at the multiple habitat conservation plan that said what we really needed to do was broad swaths. And the reason I bring that up is that this is not the intention to create a resilience plan that affects our entire coastline. This is, as I look at it, and correct me if I'm wrong, to say, look, we're beginning to get serious about this. We've got some funding to try to figure out what this means. And we're talking about doing some pilot programs to test ideas and put them in place to see how it works. And so from that point of view, I can certainly be supportive of it. And the idea that, especially given the challenges of funding for these kinds of projects, doing smaller pilot programs is the way to test the ideas and to get the public, whether it is people who live in the coastal areas or whether it is folks that visit the coastal areas, to begin to understand the kinds of things that we need to do. To the point that was raised by the public in terms of resiliency and sea level rise and our sandy beaches, how does this plan really address? I think it was several years ago that I watched the Surfrider program that was talking about as sea level rise hits, our beaches become smaller and smaller as it bumps up against development areas. But what was our thinking in terms of the importance of also preserving sandy beaches in addition to protecting our existing infrastructure?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for many of the project sites, first, the general approach of taking nature-based solutions versus a seawall is intended to maintain the beaches. When you have a seawall, you do see increased erosion and then beach loss. So by taking a more nature-based solutions approach, that is what we're trying to maintain, is both the beach but also access to the coast for community members across San Diego. For the project sites where we have dunes, it's serving the dual purpose of not only providing protection against flooding, but also a reservoir of sand that will help maintain beach width and the beaches at the Mission Beach and the Ocean Beach project sites.
Okay, and I can appreciate that, but let me give you a specific example, the Tourmaline Surfing Beach. Mm-hmm. Pretty small beach as it is, although I think there's a sand replenishment project coming in. But as we see sea level rise, that narrow beach is going to essentially disappear. So people are going to walk off the ramp there and right into the ocean waters, as opposed to the alternative of, a very expensive alternative, of actually pulling back and restoring or creating a sandy beach at a higher elevation. So even with the predicted sea level rise, we still have a sandy beach between the parking lot and the ocean waters. That didn't seem to be kind of part of the conversation here, and maybe because of the initial efforts at this stage, we weren't going to go there. But is that part of our long-range thinking, or are we just more interested in preserving access from a grassy area that would be elevated, or preserving parking lots that are already there, or restrooms, et cetera? But kind of longer term, are we thinking about our sandy beaches as part of our, quote, coastal access?
Yes, so I think to answer part of your question, beach nourishment to add sand to the beach is a shorter term solution that can maintain those beaches. In the longer term, where you have development and you see the impacts of sea level rise, oftentimes retreat is a way to maintain those beaches. It is an approach that we didn't look at closely for this stage of the planning effort. Certainly for a site like Tourmaline, if there is interest in looking at that as the project design moves forward. That's something that we could do, but it is I would say, a larger undertaking and some trade-offs that come along with that approach.
Sure. The only reason I kind of make, and it's a hard question, so I appreciate your response, because I think about, given in so many areas development has happened essentially right up on the beach, the boardwalks, parking lots, streets, public infrastructure, that at least we have the opportunity where we have our public beaches and a little more flexibility in that. So I would hope that as this conversation progresses and we move along, that we think more about that and figure out how we do that going forward. So I appreciate that. I appreciate all the outreach that you did to folks, and we do know that sometimes outreach says, this community isn't ready for this program, we'll come back later. And I'm actually quite serious where I say, this is the kind of thinking, we need to move forward on something somewhere. Let's go where there's actually a better receptivity for this. And so that's why I'm not so upset about the District 1 pilot projects that were initially identified. So I think I'm going to close with two questions. One, on the Ocean Beach, Dog Beach, I wasn't sure that I understood which of the two options or two concepts that you're actually going to be moving forward with. Was it going to be A1 or A2?
So staff's recommendation at this point is that the site moves forward and that both concepts are evaluated in the next phase. As part of the next phase, we have funding to complete technical studies that will look at probable construction costs, which would give us a sense of the different construction costs for the two project concepts. Certainly, there could be a recommendation for a specific concept, but that would be staff's recommendation, is that the site as a whole moves forward.
Okay, that's why I couldn't find it, because you haven't made that decision yet. Fair enough. And I think the last question, and this is just a bit of a nitpick that I think Heidi will appreciate. In concept B2, La Jolla Shores, there's a building there that's identified as a restroom to be relocated. That's actually a garage for the lifeguards. So maybe we need to move that as part of the program, but it's not a restroom. It's a lifeguard garage. That was correctly shown on B1. So with that, I'll be happy to, well, let me ask a question as the council president. Is the intention to come back for full discussion at the full council? Yeah, okay. With that, I'm happy to support the motion. So thank you for the very good work. This is a big, big effort and a big change in what our city is focusing on. So thank you very much.
I just want to provide one clarification. We are recommending, the recommendation to council is to adopt the Coastal Resilience Master Plan, but also establish the CIPs so that we can begin to expend the remainder of the grant funding to move those specified projects forward. Okay. And that's certainly an important part of why I'm moving this forward, because we got a grant. The grant has a timeline. We got to make as much as we can with that money. But thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Thank you, Council President. So we have a motion and a second. I will begin by saying thank you for all the work on this. There's a lot of exciting projects in here, and it's nice to see the planning documents get implemented down at the ground level, and us moving toward implementation at the ground level. There was a line that I heard at least once, maybe twice, which was not recommended, but recommended with available funding. In other words, we would like to do this. We'd recommend doing this if we had the money to do it. Is that correct?
Yes. So for La Jolla Shores, that project, we would recommend additional community engagement. There were significant differing perspectives on project designs for that site. So I think there's need to engage more with the community before an identified project concept would be to move forward. For Tourmaline Beach, we do not have, it's not recommended to move forward with the existing grant funding that we have, but should we seek additional funding, we could move that project concept forward.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that. I think it just drives home the continuous need to have the discussion about how we resource our city and the ways that we look for revenue. Our beaches and bays are very important. They're incredible assets. They're used by folks from not just the city, but across the region and across the country. And I think this is a classic example of how we should be leaning in to make sure that we're resourced well enough to do this really important work that we want to do that would make the city a more resilient and kind of just better place to live and to visit. I also, I know that this is primarily focused on addressing sea level rise, and one thing that I am curious about in terms of how we think about resiliency on the coast is there any discussion or thought about the way that solar could be included in any of the areas that are planned for?
We did not consider it in the projects. Certainly if we were to expand project footprint for some of them, so if we looked at Mission Bay Park and that parking, we could look at potentially solar on the parking lot, but that wasn't something that we explored with this project.
Ocean Beach as well.
Ocean Beach.
It's actually a very big parking lot. Nothing would be precluding us from being able to, would it be more difficult to do that because it's not in these documents?
No,
Okay.
There's nothing that would preclude future installation of any solar panels in any of the city's parking lots or any of these plans. They're not specifically identified because the scope is more focused on, the beach area where it would be less feasible to place them. But certainly when we're looking at surrounding parking areas, there's nothing in these plans or any of our plans where just because they're not identified in there, it would not preclude the city's implementation deployment of those resources.
Okay. You mentioned the beach areas, and obviously I'm not talking about, there's certain places where this wouldn't be appropriate. There's other coastal areas where the beach is wider. When I think about resiliency and the coast, obviously sea level rise is a really important part of that. But as temperatures rise, the ability for families or elders to visit the beach on particularly hot days actually can change quite a bit. Having shaded areas can make the difference between being able to actually make that trip possible. Heidi, I know you know this. So I just want to make sure that there's the opportunity to maintain some creativity. Solar can be linear. There's a lot of different ways to do it, and I want to make sure that we're not precluding ourselves from that because there's the potential benefits of shade and other things that can come with a solar project. There's also revenue that it could generate that could potentially fund some of these projects. So I think looking at these things kind of hand in hand might be useful, and again, more than anything, want to make sure we're not precluding ourselves from that flexibility or creativity.
Yeah, I think that's great feedback, and that's something that as we bring this forward to council, we can weave some of that language into the plan, and so that way when it moves into the design phase, engineering capital projects will be taking over with those efforts, but that will be feedback that can be incorporated, and we can work with your office to include some additional language in the plan as it moves forward.
Appreciate that, thank you. And just to kind of put a bow on that, I think about some of the different agreements that we have across the city, where there's a lot of different ways to structure a solar deal, right? And again, whether we're leveraging potential lease revenue, there's public-private partnerships that can be utilized there. And so the more creativity, the better, especially as we are looking for ways to fund projects that we think would be really valuable to the community. The last thing, again, recognize that this is about coastal communities. I know you all know that resilience is important beyond our coastal areas. I just wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about some of the work that you're doing outside of the coastal areas.
Sure. Led by the Urban Forestry Division, with regards to extreme heat, we have our Ready, Set, Grow program that's focusing tree planting in our communities of concern. We have microgrids that are moving forward. There are 8 projects, 4 nearing operation at the South Crest Recreation Center, Cesar Chavez Recreation Center, and fire stations 29 and 19, and then 4 additional microgrids that are currently in the permit phase. Also with regards to extreme heat, city planning is really excited to share that we were recently awarded a $750,000 grant from the state for extreme heat action planning. That will include funding not only to do significant community engagement and develop the extreme heat action plan, but also to do some demonstration pilot projects in communities to start to get things in the ground. And then further, for Climate Resilient SD as a whole, which addresses not only heat but wildfire and flooding, we have an online implementation tracker that shows the status of all of the strategies within that plan and includes highlights across the city of the work that's being done and some of the milestones that are being reached.
Thank you for that. Appreciate all the work that you're doing. So we have a motion, we have a second. Sarah, if you please call the roll.
Vice Chair Campbell, if you can please register your vote.
Yes, I vote yes.
Thank you.
And Chair, item number 5 passes unanimously 3-0.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Oh.